This conference will now be recorded.
Ask Brother Darryn to come and give us exhort on the final sense in our series. Brother Darryn.
Good morning, Pakuranga. The remnant. The common word in the Bible, the remnant. You want to be part of the remnant. So it's a delight to be here this morning to share with you. And happy Mother's Day. Indeed, we have mothers here. Who are mothers? Hands up, mothers. See, there's a few mothers. So this is for you, in part. In part, you're going to get a mention. You deserve to get a mention. But part of that is also the completion of the series that we've been doing. That's right, the series on the senses. Brother Jonathan started it some time ago without even knowing, and he delivered Use Your Tarangas. And then Brother Nick came in and initiated it as a series by doing the second sense of smell. And then Brother Ben, 2 installments. Thank you, Brother Ben, for locking it in as a series. And he covered sight and taste. And so, the mystery speaker. Remember that last week? That's me. I'll be covering touch today. And you might be thinking, the guy from Gore is going to be talking to us and encouraging us on touch. What is going on? And you know what? Fair call, because I'm not much of a toucher. Never have been, born and bred that way. I'm from the deep south, in case some of you don't know. A handshake down south is sufficient when it comes to greetings. That's quite enough. And when I came up here, all of a sudden people are getting all of my grill, wrapping their arms around me. What is going on? Uncomfortable? It was different, is all I can say. And so by your influence, and I want to say thank you, by your influence, I was able to embrace this a little bit. And I was able to take part in this touching, particularly a little bit around the greetings. And you know what I was getting there? I felt like I was getting there. Things were going okay. And then a tragedy happened. COVID, lockdown, social distancing. I relapsed. I found it very easy to fall back into my old ways. Social distancing is a way of life in the South, right? And so it just became normal again. So I plead to you, help me out, bring me back out of this recession, introduce to me touch again, and help me out with this hugging and whatnot. I'll give you a way of helping me. Make it clear to me that a hug is needed because I'm not able to pick up on it. Okay, so Jackie's put her hand up for a hug. She'll get one later. Make it clear because I'm not able to pick up when a hug is needed. You know, maybe it's been a long time since I've seen you. You know, I will happily stand there and go, hi. You might be thinking, it's a hug time. But if you're not doing this, I'm not going to pick up on it. If you're not saying it's a hug time, then I'm not going to pick up on it. So I'm asking you all, and I wished I had more people to say this to, but spread the word, please. Make it obvious that it's hug time. Then I know what's coming. So Penny's a prime example. Penny, sometimes 10, 20 meters away from me will be like this. All right, I know what's coming. I know, I can prepare myself. A hug is coming. This is what you do. One time she even did this. All right, so it was not only a visual, but an audible warning device to get my attention, to let me know that a hug is coming. And so I was able to follow on. So take her example. You don't have to be so loud with it. I get it when you say like this, or a hug is needed. So please help me. To those people out there though, to those people that know when to touch and how to touch, the gentle touches on the shoulder, the rubs, the way they just seem to know how to do it. That's astonishing to me, by the way. And you know what? You people, these people that move about in society, you're out there, you are a gift from God. I truly believe that. And those people that are being influenced by Jesus to be a bit more touchy, a bit more welcoming and greeting, you are a gift from God too. And keep doing what you're doing. So thank you. We can progress. I've been reading this book, The Love Languages of Children. And what it says, if your child's primary love language is physical touch, and you want to get them the message that you love them and that you care for them and that they mean everything to you, all you have to do is hug them and hold them and rub them on the back and kiss them and sit them on your lap. And you don't have to say anything because the touch says it all. So I'm reading the book, I'm doing self-help, you're trying to help me, we will pull together. And that goes for all of you, by the way. If your love language is physical touch, it's about those moments of touch that say everything. So this series, to me, has been a series about a story of relationships. How do you have relationships without engaging your senses? And if you're thinking about developing and increasing our relationships, all we have to do is increase the senses. Increase the sensory experience, increase the seeing by the meeting together, increase the hearing by the communication, increase the touch. And increasing taste and smell might be in the way that we share meals, let's just say, as an example. Increase that, but we're good at that. Pakuranga loves to share meals. And so this is how we can increase our relationships, by increasing our sensory experiences. Also made me think a little bit about God and our relationship with God. How do we engage the senses when it comes to our relationship with God? It's so much more challenging, and let alone increase it. So what do? I'll let you know how and why I got to this point, because I thought, well, I'm going to have to get into touch, and I'm going to have to figure out what it is in the Bible, and I'm going to do what Ben did when he did sight. I'm going to go to the very first time in the Bible that touch is mentioned. Remember Ben did that with sight? Yep, so here it is. The word naga, it's found a lot in the Bible. Here's where it's first found. Genesis 3:3, and God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it. In other words, thou shalt not touch. Great. I'm trying to extract from the Bible how we can touch, increase the sensory experience, and this is what I'm getting. You shall not touch the very first time. Ben, he turned up sight, right? And he says, and God saw that the light was good. Good one, Ben. Well done. How lucky were you for that one? And that's what we want. But touch, I struggled. And you know what? I thought maybe there's more in the Bible. Maybe there's a bit more in terms of that word naga. Maybe it appears in a more positive way later on in the Old Testament. And this is what I found. You shall not touch. You shall not go near or touch that mountain. Danger. You shall not touch the creepy crawlies. In fact, I'm okay with those things, not touching those things. You shall not touch the holy things, the holy sacred emblems and things of God. You shall not touch the woman in her uncleanness or anything she touches. You shall not touch the man who has an unusual excretion of fluid or anything he touches. And so it went on and on and on. You shall not touch. You shall not touch. Thou shalt not touch. The Old Testament was flooded with hands off. So I dropped it because I was like, I'm going nowhere with this. This is not helping me. Turns out my approach is a very Old Testament approach. Not touching. it made me think a little bit about our relationship with God. And it's a very simple level. But if you think about how our wonderful relationship with God that existed in the Garden of Eden was torn apart by us, by sin, it was broken. The relationship was not the same anymore. The sensory experience that Adam most likely experienced with God in Eden was gone. And so people didn't experience God the same way. And this is the picture that I want to take you to. God was coming back to live in the presence of his people. But I want you to think about that in the way of a sensory experience and how we experience God. Where's God in that picture? God is so buried deep underneath ram skins and badger skins and doors and curtains and layers in the Levitical priesthood and a courtyard and another door. God was virtually inaccessible, and the sensory experience was greatly reduced, still with regard to a relationship with God. I think you could probably say here that man had become desensitized to God and was not experiencing him in the fullness that a relationship can offer. But remember, we shouldn't forget, it was our fault. Sin broke this relationship. It was our fault. And so God in his mercy is bringing back and restoring this relationship. And how is he going to do that? Enter Jesus. Jesus is God's way of reinvigorating the senses and kickstarting our relationship with God. Remember what Colossians 1 said that we read this morning. He is the image of the invisible God. And later on it says, for in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. Remember Jesus said, I have manifested your name. I have manifested the essential reality of who you are, God. He said, he that hath seen me hath seen the Father. He that hath heard me is not hearing words of mine own authority, but the words of him who dwell in me. Seeing, hearing, that's right, and even touch. The people and the crowds came flocking to see, hear, and touch Jesus. Think about the situation when Jesus had to get into a boat. The crowd was pressing on him. He had to get into a boat. Think about the time in Luke, all the crowds, Luke 19, all the crowds sought to touch him, for the power came out of him and he healed them all. And there was this time when he was being thronged by the crowd. And Jesus was walking along and he stopped and he said, who touched me? And his disciples said, everyone is touching you. And you know what? I just wonder in that moment, in that time, in that period when Jesus was walking this earth, that people, did they truly appreciate what was happening? Did they truly appreciate that they were actually experiencing God in some way through Jesus? Well, I'll tell you what, this lady appreciated it when she reached out and touched him. It's true. People back then, at that time, had never experienced God quite like it before, seeing, hearing, and even touching. And it was all through Jesus. They were closer to God than they ever knew or had ever experienced before. So that's when people were hearing and touching him. But what about when Jesus touched? What is the first time Jesus touched? Arguably, there's a couple of options. And this particular one is probably not the first time that the word touch is used, but it does express him touching someone. And who is it? It's Peter's mother-in-law. Now, Simon Peter's mother-in-law lay ill with a fever, and they told him about her. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her. The first touch of Jesus was to heal a mum. Happy Mother's Day. Jesus is telling us our mums are so important. And I'm going to heal her through my touch. Jesus didn't have to heal, didn't have to touch to heal, right? But it was so deliberate of Jesus to touch her hand and to lift her up. He was saying to her, you mean a lot to me, and I love you. It's loud and clear here that Jesus is saying mums respond to physical touch. And all you need to do is give them a hug to show them that you love them. And they do so much for us, our mums. And it's quite interesting that as soon as that Jesus had healed this woman, she got up and immediately served them. Is it possible that those people in the house would never have eaten or enjoyed refreshments if Jesus had not have healed the mum? There's Jesus telling us all that mums are everything. But what about the time when Jesus touched someone? And as recorded, the word touch. It's this word here, haptomai. And it's more than just a touch. It's a fasten and it's a lay hold of. And this is used quite a lot in the Old Testament. What's the first time that he uses this word? It's very early on in his ministry. 3 times it happens, but they're all linked to one event. Here's the event, and here's the most astonishing thing in Matthew. It says, and Jesus stretched out his hand and he touched him, saying, I will be clean. Who was he? And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. First touch of Jesus was the leper. This is really significant. Think about the implications of what's happening here. You see, and think about the Old Testament as well, right? If you were a leper, what happens? Leprosy, it was one of the worst things to get that would render a man unclean under the law, because a short isolation period and washing your clothes and washing your body, that will not fix the problem. This was an incurable disease. This is a story of a man who is driven from his family, driven from his home and all that he knows, and is forced to live the rest of his days in isolation, unclean. He's an outcast. He's unwanted. He is unacceptable in society. He is committed to social distancing for the rest of his life. And get this, if you were to stray from your isolation and come near healthy people, you were commanded to yell out, unclean, unclean, so that the healthy people would know. And you know what? They would run in the opposite direction of you. And perhaps his wife and his children, if he had them, they would come out and they would spend some time each day to perhaps drop some food off and some supplies at a designated location, and he would see them at a distance. He would be able to wave to them, but he would know that he would never be able to hold his wife again. He would never be able to touch or hold his children again. And that would go on and on and on until eventually, when his family dropped off the supplies or the food, he won't turn up. He won't be there. And might be a couple of reasons for that. He won't be there because it's emotionally too hard to see his family, to see his kids growing up without a chance to hold them or touch them. But maybe it's because he's become so disfigured from the disease that his appearance is monstrous and he simply doesn't want to frighten his family. That's right. Leprosy attacks the nervous system. The infected parts of your body go numb. And that way, the gangrene and the flesh-eating diseases can start from a small infection, but you don't know because you can't feel it. You can't feel the spread, and you'll lose limbs and you'll lose fingers, you'll lose body parts because of this. But what about the physical things? What about fire? If you were to roll over and your hand was to roll in fire, you wouldn't feel it and you would lose the hand. Frostbite, lose fingers. Wild animals, it's the thing. Wild animals would be able to have a free meal because you would not be able to feel. You simply couldn't feel the pain. And this is why this miracle is most interesting with this topic, because if you are blind, you can't see. If you're deaf, you can't hear. But if you have leprosy, you can't feel. So this man was recorded as being full of leprosy, and he was most likely disfigured and completely numb all over. And he comes and he falls at the feet of Jesus. The disciples run away and stand back in terror at the very sight of the man to protect themselves from the disease. And the man says to Jesus, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." And the first thing Jesus does, touch him. Possibly an embrace, if you look at the Greek word. And Jesus says, "I am willing." Isn't that interesting? And Jesus touches and embraces him before he even says, "I am willing." Jesus' touch says it all, doesn't it? Clearly, Jesus is willing. He's the only man to have gone up to a leper in those times, approached a leper and touched him, when everyone else runs away. So this man, when you think about it, had never been touched in years. And the first thing that he would have felt was the hand or the embrace of Jesus as the feeling came back into his body. Jesus touched the untouchable. He was not afraid of that contagious disease, and all that mattered to Jesus was the man who had been so heavily desensitized from having a normal relationship was able to experience touch again. I wonder if he even realized that he'd been touched by the high priest who had cleansed him. Because it's interesting, Jesus sends the man to the priest. It says, the priest, he's going to deem you clean again and you'll be able to live back in society. Why did Jesus do that? Jesus was the high priest. You know what? It was a loud message to the law of the time. How many times had a priest deemed someone with leprosy and that leper had come back healed? That would have rung shockwaves through the country. The priests would have thought, what has happened here? No one has come back from leprosy. And yet he would have found a few come back from leprosy while Jesus was around, right? Did Jesus have to touch this man to heal him? The answer is no. We know Jesus from the records was able to heal remotely. But it was so important that Jesus touched this man. He was sending a message and he was unlocking the senses so that he could experience God again. Really, this is Jesus unlocking the senses, both figuratively and literally. Jesus is recorded as touching the eyes, touching the ears, touching the tongue, and touching hands. He is unlocking the senses, both, as I said, figuratively and literally. People are experiencing God like they've never experienced him before. The senses are engaged. He's restoring the senses. The curtain has been ripped, or it was being ripped. The barriers are coming down. God is once again becoming accessible in this relationship, and it's all through Jesus. People brought kids to him so that Jesus could touch him. The disciples said, no, they've got to go. Get the kids away. In other words, the disciples were saying, thou shalt not touch. You shall not touch. No touching. And Jesus says, you bring those kids to me. And he sat them on his lap. He took them in his arms and he blessed them. He laid hands on them. If there was ever a picture to highlight the saying, he that hath seen me hath seen the Father, that would be it. Jesus acting as the Father. It was so important that he touched the kids, that they experienced him in that way. Last point, 2 verses. Paul explains, and he is proclaiming to the Greeks about this unknown God in Acts 17. He's telling them about this God that they have not met yet. or have not experienced. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth. He doesn't live in temples made by hand, nor is he served by human hands. He made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling place, that, as it says up there, they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us. They should seek God and feel their way toward him. What's that mean? How can we do that? Seems profound, doesn't it? What is Paul talking about? Well, that word, feel, is only used 4 times in the Greek in the New Testament. And I want to show you the other time, one of the other times it's used in the Greek, the one time it's used in the gospel, that might help us to figure out what it is to feel our way toward God. I think we already know the answer, right? Luke 24, Jesus says to his disciples, "See my hands and my feet. It is me. Touch me and see." Do you think Paul is saying the way we feel toward God is through Jesus? It's the only way. That's what Paul's thinking about. That's how we feel again. To experience God, Jesus. So our hope in the future is to actually see and touch and hear him. But in the meantime, look around you and enjoy the relationships that you have with those people that are influenced by Jesus, and enjoy seeing and hearing and touching them. Because is that not the way that we will experience God before Jesus returns? And hug your mother.